So the segment has started. The presenter is introducing the topic. This is a seminar that is organized by Aljazeera Centre for Studies in cooperation with Aljazeera Mubasher. So this is the directions and pathways of the Yemeni crisis in the light of the Joe Biden administration. So the President of the United States of America has made a promise at the beginning of February, and it talks about ending the crisis, the war that has been running for 7 years, and that he called for stopping the support and the sales of arms to the military cooperation headed by Saudi Arabia. So we have with us from Washington. You're going to appear in vision now, sir. Please stand by. You're in vision now, sir. Welcome, sir. Welcome, Your Excellency, the Ambassador. From Istanbul, the guest is going to appear now in vision. Welcome, sir. And from Dimar Governorate, Mr. Mohammed Al-Bukhaiti is going to be coming soon to join us in this segment. And in the studio, we have Saeed Tabit, who is our bureau chief. So before we start with the discussion, we would like to present to you a video that is going to talk about the developments with regard to the Yemeni crisis between 2014 till date. So we have the developments that have taken place since 2014. So the Houthis that have stormed the capital, and also the storm of dissolve started, headed by Saudi Arabia. Abdullah Saleh established a salvation government. The Houthis in 2017 killed Ali Abdullah Saleh. 2018, the Houthis launched a ballistic missile that targeted an airport in Riyadh. 2019, the Houthis targeted Aramco. 2019, the Transitional Southern Council carried out a coup in Aden, and the Emirati aircrafts carried out raids in the south. The Yemeni government and the Southern Transitional Council, they signed the Riyadh agreement. So the coalition forces in 2020 had unilaterally announced the halting of the ceasefire. Also, we have the control of Socotra that took place in 2020, and also after pressure by Saudi Arabia, the Transitional Council announced its self-governance, and also we have had a deal that took place in 2020 where there was an exchange of prisoners and also attacks by the Houthis on Saudi Arabia. 2021, Joe Biden calls for ending the war in Yemen, and Saudi Arabia announced that it wanted to reach a political solution that would put an end to the crisis in Yemen. So this is just a report that gives us a kind of a brief summary of the most important highlights of the crisis. So would like to start with you, Your Excellency, the Ambassador. Welcome, Your Excellency. You are the United States Ambassador to Yemen. So what are the traits of the American policy vis-a-vis Yemen in the light of the Biden administration, and how does the United States of America see a solution in Yemen? Does it have a clear plan for a solution in the light of what is happening on the ground, taking into account the exchanges or sharing of hegemony in Yemen between the separatists in the south and the legitimate government? If you can kindly go slowly, please.
Sure, and thank you so much for including me in the program today. Clearly, when President Biden came into office, he was determined to follow through on the commitments that he had made on the campaign trail to shift U.S. policy toward strong support for a political resolution of the crisis. It was not that the United States had developed its own plan. It was only that the United States was going to further intensify, to strengthen its support for the effort being led by the UN Special Envoy, Martin Griffiths. So the president did two things. One, to help set the tone for a return to the negotiating table. The president said that he was no longer going to have U.S. support for Saudi military operations inside of Yemen. He did, of course, say that we would continue to stand by our Saudi partners in defending their territory from attacks by the Houthis from Yemen into Saudi Arabia. The second step that the president took was to name Timothy Lenderking, a career Foreign Service officer, very experienced, very knowledgeable of the situation in Yemen, as our special envoy, and tasked him with supporting the Martin Griffiths effort. So that's where we are in terms of the Biden approach. It's very different from the approach that was underway with President Trump. And the hope was that this would give a clear sign to the parties to the conflict, the Houthis and the legitimate government, that the time had come to return to negotiations, end the fighting, and achieve a political resolution of the conflict.
So there is no magical solution. So Biden promised in his campaign, and he is building on what has been done by Martin Griffith. Of course, I would like now to move to Mr. Mohammed Qizan, the Undersecretary of the Ministry of Communication of the Yemeni legitimate government. So I would like to ask you, how does the Yemeni government see the American intervention in the light of the Biden intervention, and what is the view of the legitimate government as a solution for the crisis? So the Yemeni government thinks that the interest in the Yemeni dossier should be a priority, and this should be in keeping with the position of the legitimate government that wants to achieve a political solution that would end the war that was started by the Houthis that are supported by the Iranians. For the Yemenis to enjoy stability and peace. The Yemeni government welcomed the UN decision for Yemen to enjoy peaceful and lasting peace based on the different UN resolutions, particularly 2216. But please allow me, from a personal perspective, I would like to say that the latest American decisions would not lead to ending the crisis in Yemen and would not lead to integration for peace, because this group only lives on killing and destruction and so on and so forth. So they have delisted Ansar Allah, and also we have seen the attacks that have been carried out through ballistic missiles and also through the use of drones, which has led to the killing so many people, and also which has led to the displacement of so many people. So the Houthis do not care about the interests of the Yemenis. These are an arm of the Iranians, and try to carry out maneuvers by proxy against the Yemeni people. So if the Biden administration is serious, so it has to put utmost pressure on the militias for them to go back to the negotiations and not give them free of charge gifts and give them indications that they are not going to be held accountable. We know that the Iranians are not going to lead the Houthis to cease fire free of charge. They are not going to allow a solution free of charge. So the presenter is interjecting. What is America required to do on the ground? You have given so many details. So what is required from your end? Yeah, his Excellency the Ambassador talked about the appointment of Mr. Linder King and the cooperation with Griffith. So, are there any political, economic, military pressures? The United States of America says that it has a diplomatic move in order to find solutions to crises. So, the Yemeni government wants to have a fair resolution based on equality and good governance. And we have no doubt that the United States and the international community are going to pressure the militias to accept these plans. We know that the Yemeni people, in the aftermath of the revolution, they have undertaken serious steps in order to move for political successful work through the establishment, the outcomes of national dialogue, and also the writing and building of a constitution that would make Yemen be on par with stable countries. So, in cooperation with the different entities. But we are calling upon the American administration to pressure Iran if they are serious. We know that the Houthis are in the hands or moved by the Iranians. We have seen the violations, we have seen the targeting of the different communities. The only thing that we have heard from the United States of America and the international community is condemnations. So this is similar to giving the green light to the militias for them to achieve their objectives, and after that we see the American administration intervene. So that is why we call upon the Biden administration to pressure not only through words, tell them if they do not stop attacking Ma'rib, Ta'az, Al Jawf, that they're going to have real positions. So the American administration has designated two personalities, but I think that the Houthis are not one or two persons. The whole group is a terrorist group, whether they are designated by the American administration or not designated. If the Biden administration is serious, there should be serious decisions, positions that should bind these groups to stop the aggression on the Yemeni people. So please stay with us. The presenter is saying, I would like to move now to the other opinion. I would like to move to Mr. Muhammad Al-Bukhaiti, member of the Political Bureau of the Houthis. Mr. Muhammad, how does the Houthi group see the new policy of the new government in the United States of America, particularly that the new government has delisted the Houthis from the terrorist group? How did you interact with this kind of decision that was undertaken? So, Mr. Muhammad, in the name of God, the most compassionate. So, first of all, there is a new pathway with regard to the policies of the United States of America. So the policies would not change because the president has been changed. No, this policy has started with Obama. The objective of the United States of America is constant, is the same. They want to have hegemony over the region because they have to keep the hegemony of Israel, and this can only be achieved through feeding the different conflicts that are taking place in the region. If we look into the map, we see that there is stability that is unprecedented except the Arab region. If you look at the map of the world, it is stable except for the Arab region because these conflicts are still feeding the interests of the US and Israel. So that is why we see wherever America intervenes, wherever its allies interfere or intervene, you will find that there are crises, there are wars, there are political crises that are very difficult to solve. In addition to that, the United States of America tries to instill animosities amongst us. Remember, before the invasion of Iraq, they said we would like to liberate the Shiite majority in Iraq. The presenter is interjecting. He said, "Yes, what you're saying is interesting, but I would like you to concentrate on the Yemeni situation." You have listened to the two opinions by His Excellency the Ambassador and also by the representative of the legitimate government. You have given them the opportunity to speak, but please, I need to have a number of parameters based on which I would like to explain my opinion. I would like to talk about the strategic dimension. I'm not going to talk about the outcomes, but I would like to talk about the reasons. I talk about the reasons and the parameters in general. What has the United States of America done in Iraq? He said we're going to liberate the Shiites, and after that we're going to withdraw. After that, they occupied Iraq, and they said we have to stay in order to protect the minorities, the Sunni minorities, from the majority, which is the Shiite majority. Look, they have found a way through our feelings. So they incited a civil war that is unprecedented. So the situation has not changed. So Joe Biden, when he came to power, he did not allow the oil derivatives to enter Yemen. And we all know that these oil derivatives are the source of life of our people, particularly the Yemeni people who rely a great deal on agriculture, on underground water, and we need the oil, particularly diesel. So now our factories are not working. Hospitals also are threatened, so they're facing high risks. So this is a kind of a verdict against the Yemeni people. Though there is no change, I have to say. So it is really stupid to expect any change when it comes to the American policy vis-à-vis Yemen, because the war in the region still represents an American interest. So what is the solution? The solution is to unify our ranks as Arabs and Muslims, and also to channel our animosity to the Americans and the Israelis, the Jews and the Christians. Those who use them as wali, they are not going to be with the truthful people. They're going to be with the persecutors, with the people who are practicing injustices. So we have to unify our ranks against the United States of America. We should not fight based on sectarian reasons or religious reasons. So there are Emirati interests, there are U.S. interests, there are Emirati interests, there are Saudi interests, there are Yemeni interests. We should unify these ranks. Had the United States of America wanted to have peace in the region, they could have directed both Bin Salman, MBS and MBZ to stop the war. And what is the vision for peace in Yemen? So what is the vision of the U.S. for peace in the region? So they want the Yemenis to stop their attacks. So they want them to do that unilaterally. So the presenter is interjecting. You have taken more than 5 minutes in your intervention. I'm going to come back to you. Please stay with us. I would like to move to Mr. Saeed Thabit. So welcome, sir. How does regional countries, particularly the coalition countries, Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, how do they see the crisis and the American position in the light of the Joe Biden administration? How do you see the situation? How do you read and analyze the Yemeni scene? With regard to the countries of the region, particularly Saudi Arabia is having perhaps the longest land borders. We're talking about 1,440 kilometers. So they look at Yemen as a strategic kind of depth for Saudi Arabia. So it is the country that interferes the most in the Yemeni scene since the 70s of the 20th century. So Saudi Arabia has the largest Yemeni community in the whole world. So all these are factors of influence due to the neighborhood between the two countries, due to so many factors. The Saudis, they look into the changes that are happening, particularly when it comes to the Biden policy. They look at it as a policy that is based on four pillars when it comes to Yemen. So to stop the attacks, to support the defense of Saudi Arabia, the diplomatic pathway, and also the delisting of the Houthis in the region. So we do remember, as Mohammed Bekhiti had said, that the war, when it started, the internal war happened before the storm of resolve, and the storm of resolve started during the Obama administration, and the vice president is today the president of the United States of America. What had been noticed is that halting the attacks were linked only to the Saudis. Sorry, Mr. Saeed, the presenter is saying. Mohammed Bakhit, he said, had the United States of America wanted to have peace, it could have asked both the Emiratis and the Saudis to halt their operations. So the Saudis and the Yemenis, how do they look into the Biden plan in order to solve the crisis, as the United States of America says? As it was mentioned by so many officials in the US, the Emiratis and Saudis, they look at this decision as an extension of the different policies by the US to have dialogue, peace, and so on and so forth. We should not forget the Kerry initiative, which is also within the same line. So it seems that they have had, they were not happy with the delisting of the Houthis, and they thought that the Houthis would increase their attacks on Saudi Arabia. Of course, they have had attacks on Saudi Arabia and on Maghreb. That is why Saudi Arabia thinks that the American administration is not in a stable situation, because it is still at the beginning of its term and that it is finding difficulties dealing with this dossier. And for the first time, the American administration appoints an envoy, and undoubtedly the Saudis think that this is going to alleviate the crisis, but it is going not to put an end to the crisis. Even the ceasefire and the demilitarization, and also to halt the sales of arms. So the war is not taking place with the American arms. So the presenter is now interjecting, taking into account dialogue, which is very important indeed as a component, particularly that Griffith has been calling for that. So the Saudis want to secure their southern borders, their territories. They want to secure their northern territories. If that dream is not achieved, they're going to continue thinking that this is going to be threatening their security. Your Excellency, the ambassador, after the American administration had delisted the Houthis, we have seen an increase in the attacks carried out by the Houthis. We have seen so many ballistic missiles targeting cities, including Riyadh, and their wars, their attacks have increased, have become much more fierce. So Maghreb has 2 million IDPs, which aggravates the situation in Yemen. How does the US look at this escalation, and how can we halt this escalation? How can the US, pressure them in order to stop a catastrophe, humanitarian catastrophe?
Well, this is, of course, a major issue. I mean, certainly, when President Biden announced the new policy, his hope was that the parties, the Houthis and the government of Yemen, would see this as an opportunity to revisit or rethink their strategy and decide that their interests were best served by coming back to the negotiating table and working out an agreement under the direction, under the support of the United Nations and the UN Special Envoy Martin Griffiths. Unfortunately, the Houthis went in exactly the opposite direction. Rather than reducing their military engagement and giving an opportunity to address some of the concerns, they have increased their attacks inside of Yemen, in Marib, in Al Jalf, in other locations in Yemen, as well as more attacks across the border into Saudi Arabia. I want to be clear that the reason that the Biden administration decided to remove the Houthis from the foreign terrorist organization list was not because there's a difference of view between the Biden administration and the Trump administration about the nature of the Houthis. Everybody understands that this conflict is a result of Houthi aggression inside of Yemen. But they made the decision to remove the Houthis from the list because of their concern that it was going to harm innocent Yemeni civilians, not because of the Houthis. And so the desire is still to do more to try to represent the interests of the vast majority of Yemenis who are not supporters of the Houthis, who only want to live in peace inside of their country, to be able to feed their families, to be able to live securely in their own homes. And so, unfortunately, we're now in a situation where we don't know whether the efforts of the UN Special Envoy can make progress or not. If they don't, then I would think that the administration would have to rethink the approach that it's taken because the Houthis cannot be allowed to achieve a military victory inside of Yemen. This is not acceptable. If they're not going to negotiate, then I think that there needs to be a different direction.
Your Excellency, the Ambassador, as you have heard, the Undersecretary of the Legitimate Government's representative, there are two theories. Al-Bukhaiti says that managing the conflict in the United States is different. They say diplomatic words, but the representative of the ministry in Yemen, so they are saying, can America intervene in a much stronger way for them to have decisive decisions and the war ends. Cannot the United States of America stop the war and ease the Yemenis from this crisis?
Well, I think, I mean, I've heard Mr. Bukhaiti before. Mr. Bukhaiti wants to talk about everything except Yemen. He wants to talk about Iraq. He wants to talk about Israel. He wants to talk about the man in the moon. He doesn't want to talk about Yemen because he has nothing to offer on Yemen. He has no positive message about Yemen. And so this is a concern. The United States is willing to talk to the Houthis, is willing to sit down and try to identify a way forward with the Houthis to resolve this conflict. Martin Griffiths has been in Tehran talking to the Iranian leadership to try to convince them to support a political resolution of the conflict and to communicate to the Houthis that the time has come to negotiate. And hopefully the Iranians will be helpful here. So there are a number of different things that can be done that would put more pressure, that would put on the table better strategies for resolving the issue and returning to negotiations, returning to a legitimate government in Sana'a, returning to humanitarian assistance to the Yemeni people, an end of the blockades, an end of all of the issues that are interfering with the lives of millions of innocent Yemenis. And I think it's unfortunate that we didn't hear from either Mr. Bakheti or the representative of the Hadi government any expression of concern about the well-being of the millions of Yemeni civilians who are suffering from malnutrition, who are suffering from a health crisis, who are suffering from a lack of social services, education, and other things for 7 years now because of this civil war.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Please stay with us. Now the question is to the representative of the legitimate government, Mr. Muhammad. The question is, what can be the role of the government now in light of this crisis? What can the government of Yemen, headed by Ma'in Abdul Malik, to do in Ma'rib in light of the attacks of of the Houthis on the city? How can one face this escalation and to prevent a new disaster? The gentleman says that I agree with what was said by the ambassador, that Mr. Bakhiti speaks as if he is from another planet. He is far away from reality. He's trying to fool simple-minded people. What he's saying is contrary to what's going on the ground. They have been against peace. He has always said that Ma'rab is a small village then, and and one should be proud that there are more than 6,000 deaths there. He said that the inhabitants of Ma'rab are non-believers, are Jews, so let them die. The Houthi militias have killed so many people, especially children, in implementation of orders coming from the Iranian regime to destabilize Yemen and the region. The forces of the national army are doing their national job, defending and the land and the civilians. The fight in Ma'rib now is a decisive battle between the many people and the Iranian project for the region, which is not only for Yemen but all the countries of the Arab Peninsula. As for the government's, the legitimate government's duty is now to give support to the national army and the popular resistance by supporting them so that the army can stop these attacks of the Houthis, who are coming by thousands to invade Ma'rib. The government has adopted a plan to enforce and to enhance all and to provide all the necessary means to support the people of Ma'rib and to protect them. But in fact, the solution has not reached its final objective. We have many, we have Habada, Damar, Raima, Saada, and Umran, and all these cities, the presidents of these cities have sent letters to the government calling for announcing the Suwaid to denounce or to put an end to the Suwaid agreement, because the Houthis have spoiled the country, stolen all its riches, and so I think cancelling or putting an end to this agreement will be a way to stop these militias and to force them to come to accept peace. And there's also a call for the convening of the National Defense Council and in order to make sure that the salaries of the soldiers are paid in a regular way, and also one should announce general mobilization in all to liberate all the governorates occupied by the Iranian forces with the Houthis. He's saying it's really a shame that we just keep looking at the Houthis taking control on one governorate after the other. We need to enforce our military capabilities, defend these cities to stop the Houthis. And was said by the ambassador, they did not talk about the sufferings of the people of Yemen, which is something very clear. When Berida was attacked, the international community intervened and stopped what's going on. But now in Maghreb, even the situation is worse, but nothing is being done to stop what they're doing. The international community must intervene forcibly. We call UN and humanitarian organizations to urgently intervene to save millions of people, of displaced people. The presenter is interrupting him, saying that now the question is to Mr. Mohammed Duhaiti from the Houthis. He's asking him, why are you escalating and your attacks on Yemen grounds and on Saudi Arabia, especially in Maghreb? Aren't you worried for the Yemeni people and the very humanitarian level, humanitarian casualties? Why? Why are you escalating? Is it only to be stronger in negotiations? The gentleman says, no, it's not us who escalated. It is the aggressive countries led by US who have made the aggression and the escalation by stopping, banning the arrival of humanitarian aid to our country. So we had no other option but to 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 send away or to expulse the Saudis and to open or to break this blockade on us. We are not going to wait to be starving. We had to stop or to break the blockade on us by force. Otherwise, we would have nothing to eat or drink. So it is they who escalated. In return of 100 attacks by the Saudis, there's only one attack on the Saudis. So it is them. And also something important we should take care about. You notice that the American ambassador do not want us to speak about the reasons and why things happened. They want us to speak about only the results and the details. That's why the ambassador was not happy with me. Me as a Muslim who speaks about Palestine, about Iraq, about Arab countries. He was not happy to hear this. What is it to you? Why do you intervene about that? He's asking you, Mr. Ambassador. While as the Americans are intervening in Saudi Arabia and Iraq and Palestine, but saying that we will not allow Ansar Allah to be victorious in Yemen. What are you in this? Why, you have no business in this. So I say, the presenters interrupting that we are in a dialogue, we are not about attacking people or anybody. Please, he thinks we should be limited to the speaking about Yemen and the issue of Yemen. The question is clear. My question is clear. Why are you escalating? That's my question. You said the Americans are not allowing for petroleum or gas to go into Yemen. But my question is, why are you escalating, attacking Maghreb? And please don't use such a bad language. The gentleman says, yes, I answered you that it's not us who have escalated, it is USA by stopping the entering of gas and gas oils and the other petroleum derivatives. So we should not wait to die. No, the Yemenis will fight to regain control on the oil fields, and now U.S. is speaking about peace, but they reject peace. The vision of Yemen for peace is that to stop war in a definite way and to lift the blockade. The presenter is interrupting him. He says, no, no, allow me, allow me. Don't interrupt me. You don't interrupt the others, you interrupt me only. The presenter says, no, every speaker has 5 minutes. So, okay, go ahead. So the Houthi gentleman says, we must deal with USA as enemy. How was the USA dealing with the Palestinians? Palestine was occupied by US and deprived the Palestinians from living on their ground. And when the Palestinian defends himself, they say he's a terrorist. The presenter is interrupting him, say, please, we are speaking about Yemen, not about Palestine. Now the question is to Mr. Saeed Thabit, the bureau chief of bureau of Jazeera in Yemen. So the Houthis are killing people, and the pretext that USA have banned the assistance or the petroleum derivatives. The gentleman says it's only justifications the Houthis are giving. But if we see how this last campaign against Maghreb it began, and that there were for some kidnapped women that must be liberated. Then they also said something else that we must liberate the grounds and to fight those who are attacking the ground. Then they said that's the petroleum issue. By the way, 2 days ago, Maghreb was announced that big quantities of petroleum were entered into Sana'a, and saying that petroleum or gas has reached Sana'a. But in fact, this only justifications what the Houthis are saying. The timing is important. The operation began in Maghreb on the 7th of the month with the visit of the UN envoy to Muscat and the delisting of the Houthis. That was on the 6th, and so at the same time they did this. So the attack was in light of some idea within the Houthis that they think that this is the appropriate time for us to achieve our goals. As for the petroleum issue, UN, it's the observer, and says that the presenter, is this the reason of the savage escalation on Maghreb and the attacks on Saudi towns? The gentleman says this group of Houthis have received different or unclear messages, thinking that the international community is giving them a green light to attack Maghreb with the appointment of the American envoy. When the justifications were gone for attacking Maghreb, it was under the pretext that there are some detained women that must be liberated. This reminds me of that 2017, Sana'a was attacked under the pretext of petroleum something. The pretext also does about fuel. So they will always use different justifications for what they do, until they understand their military action will be useless, and no one would accept this group that want to impose their agenda on all the Yemeni people. Mr. Ambassador, the question is to you now. The American approach now to stop the war in Yemen, what chances that have? Especially is it related to the nuclear program of Iran, especially that the Department of Defense in the USA said that the Iranians are providing the Houthis with the military support.
Well, I think that it's very
أعتقد
early on,
من السابق
and I'm
بأعوامه
still optimistic that
لأنني أنا ما زال
that the parties will make a
متفائل
decision
بأن
to come back
الحوثيين
to the
سيتخذون
negotiating
قرار
table.
العودة إلى مائدة
The
المفاوضات،
UN Special
وأن
Envoy
الوقوف
has a
الخاص للأمم
proposal,
المتحدة
the
فعلا
joint
لديه مقترح
declaration, which
لإصدار
would be for a
إعلان مشترك
comprehensive
سيكون
ceasefire.
للتوصل إلى وقف
It
إطلاق،
would reopen the Sana'a
شامل وإعادة
airport.
فتح مطار
It would
صنعاء
take other steps that would
واتخاذ خطوات
relieve
أخرى
the humanitarian situation inside
ستخفف
of
من الوضع
Yemen. So
الإنساني
this
في
would be a
اليمن.
very
إذا
positive
هذه
first step,
ستكون خطوة
and
أولى
it would
إيجابية
open the
جدا
door,
وستفتح
hopefully,
الأبواب على ما
to a
نأمل
continuation of
أمام
the political
التواصل واستمرار
negotiations
المفاوضات
for
السياسية
a
من أجل
comprehensive
التوصل
end
إلى
to the conflict and a
نهاية
return to the
شاملة
political
للنزاع
transition
والانتقال
that
إلى
was
العملية
interrupted in
الانتقالية السياسية التي
2014.
قُطعت في
So that's the
2014.
hope.
إذا هذا هو ما
I
نأمله،
think that from
وأعتقد
the
أنه من
perspective of
وجهة
the broader
نظر
Biden administration approach in
إدارة
the region,
بايدن
which
وأسلوبها في التعامل مع
includes
المنطقة
reducing the
والأسلوب الذي
tensions in the
يشمل
Gulf,
تخفيف التوترات في
hopefully
منطقة الخليج
between
على ما
Saudi
نأمل بين
Arabia and the
الدولة
UAE
السعودية
and Iran,
والإمارات وعمان،
and also
وأيضا
coming back to the table
العودة
with the
إلى مائدة
Iranians,
المفاوضات مع الإيرانيين،
a positive
وهذا كله هي
negotiation in
للوصول إلى
Yemen would
مفاوضات
help
إيجابية
achieve
في اليمن
all of those
ستساعد على
objectives.
تحقيق
So
كل هذه
it would
الأهداف،
be an
وبالتالي
important step
ستكون تلك خطوة
towards
مهمة
strengthening
للتوصل إلى
security and
تعزيز
stability
الأمن
in the
والاستقرار
entire
في
Gulf
كل
region.
منطقة
And
الخليج،
this is the hope.
وهذا هو ما
And hopefully
نأمله،
the
ونأمل
Iranians
أيضا
will
أن
understand
إيران
this as
ستفهم
well
هذا
and
الأمر
be
جيدا
positive
وأن تكون
partners,
شريكا
positive
إيجابيا
forces
وقوة
in bringing the
إيجابية
parties
في
back,
جلب الأطراف
convincing the
المعنية إلى
Houthis to
مائدة
return
المفاوضات
to the
وإقناع الحوثيين
negotiations
العودة إلى هذه
and helping
المفاوضات
to secure
ومساعدة
a
على
good outcome.
تأمين نتيجة جيدة. Mr. Ambassador, convincing the Houthis who were delisted from the terrorist groups by USA, the Houthis are now escalating, attacking Saudi towns and savage attacks on Maghreb. So, do you think they have did the Houthis misunderstand the delisting of their names? Have they misunderstood what this step?
It's a very
نعم،
good
هذا
question, and
سؤال
of
وجيه
course,
للغاية،
perhaps Mr.
وطبعا
Baketi would
ربما
be the
السيد
better
بخيتي هو
person to
الشخص
ask.
الأفضل
I
لاستيلاء
hope
هذا
that that's
السؤال
not
عليه.
true.
آمل أن
I
لا يكون
hope
ذلك
that they
صحيحا،
didn't
وآمل بأنهم
misunderstand
لم يسيئوا فهم
President Biden's
هذا
proposal
المقترح من
for a
الرئيس بايدن
political resolution
للتوصل إلى
as a
حل
sign of
سياسي،
weakness.
لا ولا لا
They should
يعتبر
not have
ذلك علامة على
taken that
الضعف،
message
كلا،
away.
لا يجب لكن
They
فهموا
should
هذه الرسالة بهذه
understand
الطريقة، بل
that this
عليهم
is
أن
an
يفهموا
opportunity
أن
for
هذه
them
فرصة بالنسبة
to
لهم
try to
ليحاولوا
achieve
تحقيق
some kind of
نوع من
legitimacy through
الشرعية عن
negotiations.
طريق المفاوضات،
But if they continue
ولكن
to
إذا ما
attack
استمروا
inside of
بالهجمات
Yemen, if they
الأطراف
continue to
المعنية
put
في اليمن،
innocent
وإذا ما
Yemeni lives at
يواصلوا
risk,
تعريض
as
حياة
well as
اليمنيين
continuing
الأبرياء
their
للخطر،
aggression
وإذا ما
across the
وصلوا
border in Saudi
اعتداءاتهم عبر
Arabia,
الحدود على
then I
السعودية،
think that
فأعتقد
there will have to
آنذاك
be a
أنه سيكون
reconsideration. There
لابد
will have
إعادة
to be a
نظر
rethinking
وإعادة
in
تفكير
Washington
في واشنطن
about how
حول
to bring an
كيفية
end to
التوصل إلى
this
النهاية
catastrophic civil
لهذه الحرب الكارثية.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you very much. But stay with us. We are now asking Mr. Mohammed Khizan from the government of Yemen. Do you think there's a possibility of success of the American approach? The gentleman says, before answering your question, we must know that Mohammed Bakheti is trying to cheat and to fool people. He tries to pretend that they are fighting Israel, is fighting USA. This is not true. Their fight is against the Yemeni people. They have killed more than 250,000 Yemenis, and they have never killed one American or one Israeli soldier. And now they're attacking Ma'rab by ballistic rockets. As for the possibilities of success of the American approach, I speak for in the representing the Yemeni people. We find that the message of Americans were not serious enough to put pressure on the Houthis. And in fact, the Houthis were listed in the terrorist groups only at a late period, and then it was delisted. But the people of Yemen consider that delisting the Houthis from this group is seen by the Yemeni people as a gift given to the Houthis that enforces them. The Biden administration, he says, is dealing with the Yemeni issue only from an angle of revenging against Trump's administration, and they consider the Yemeni issue as only one of the issues or within the issues of fighting terrorism. While as the Yemeni government wants US aid to put an end to the war. But to do so, we must know what are the main or basic reasons for the war, which was really the coup d'etat led by the Houthis. This is the beginnings of the war. And there are also the UN resolution, especially 2216. We must tackle the root reasons of the war, so that we don't, the failures are not repeated. He said we must have some clear mechanisms and practical steps to put an end to the coup d'etat and brings back legitimacy. The presenter says we now go back to Mr. Bakheti. How do the Houthis see the possibility of a solution? What are your conditions to stop your military action? Or only do you want to prolong the war and helping Iran in their negotiations with the nuclear program with the West? The gentleman says the war must stop immediately, he says. No one has right to put preconditions to that. But the problem, he says, is that the aggression countries and their mercenaries refuse stopping the war and lifting the blockade. They speak about peace process as they did about Palestine. They only speak about a process of peace, not real peace, and this applies to Yemen. And they want to stop the war unilaterally. This is not possible. He says that the Americans must either to surrender. The Americans say we have the right to kill and the Yemenis and to put political blockade on them. They have no right to do so. So it's they who refuse stopping the war, not us. And I say this officially. And you also know that they all want to put us into details. In the beginning, the aggressive countries reached Ma'rab and they were going to wanted to invade Sana'a. But later on,
When we increased our forces, we were able to attack the depth of Saudi Arabia. Then now they say, stop your attacks against Saudi Arabia. While as they say, we have to continue attacking you. This is not acceptable, because peace means stopping war completely. The presenter is interrupting him. He is attacking, say, why the Mexican say we are terrorists and you cannot say they are imposters. No. He says, I have the right. They say they have the right to continue aggression on Yemen. The president trying to interrupt him. Is it true that the American envoy has met in Sana'a with the spokesperson, Muhammad Abdul Salam? Is this true? No, he says, I have no information about that. Not that this first time I hear about this. He says, I still have my 5 minutes, he says. When Muhammad guys speaks, Ma'da provide you with gas and petroleum. They have not allowed Yemen to buy petroleum derivatives from the international markets, so that they sell the petroleum to us in double prices. The Yemeni people know that what they say is only lies. The presenter is interrupting him. Says the president, say, I'll give you an extra 2 minutes to answer the question. I asked you about you are prolonging the war to help Iran in their negotiation position about their nuclear program. Answer this question, please. The gentleman said, I am member of the political bureau of Ansar Allah. I to speak to you in official capacity. We accept stopping the war now without any preconditions. America, but the question is the U.S., Emirates, Saudi, and their mercenaries, do they accept that? No, they do not accept that. So who is prolonging the war? This is that why I say that peace means stopping the war unilaterally, and the continuation of the blockade is an impostor, a hypocrite, and a liar. The presenter is interrupting him, say, okay, your answer is clear. He's interrupting him, saying, now, it's clear that you want stopping the war by that condition. Now, let's ask Mr. Saeed from the Aljazeera. He says that he's spokesperson of the Houthis. Do you think, is this possible? They stop the war, and Iran is now convinced wants to stop its intervention in Yemen and accept the American approach. What has the coalition countries achieved so far? And is it possible to stop the war if all these factors are there, as the Houthis say? This is said that dead. The gentleman says wars do not come to an end by wishes and declarations. Everybody says that they want an end to the war, but the facts or the reality says different thing. Because ceasefire has its conditions. If it's an issue of, if the issue of exchanging prisoners could not be achieved as part of the Stockholm Agreement. Few days they met in Amman, and the things stopped because of some details. So ceasefire is something very important. But is this possible to when the Houthis if they have any real independence, and also the government, I think both sides are not independent in taking decisions. I think if the war stops in Yemen, externally, that does not mean the internal war has stopped also, because the coup d'etat has created a big problem. Because before the storm of resolve began, there was something which is the coup d'etat. So people now to go back to that point. The Yemenis want to implement the results of the national dialogue, but the Houthis think that they can control all Yemen, which is impossible. And the coalition also have their own narrow calculations in Yemen, wanting to achieve some of their agendas about in Yemen. So the decision is in the hands of the free Yemenis who want to achieve peace without big slogans. But when will that be possible? This will be only when this arrogance of both sides stops or comes to an end, and there will be sort of balance of forces, and then they meet on one at the negotiation table. As was said by Mr. Muhammad, this is a beautiful dream. But if the Houthis nor the government had been able to release 4 journalists or some detainees, if they couldn't do this, how could they stop the war? The presenter segment is saying that we come we come to the social media part of the program to see what of the social media is saying on our Facebook, Twitter, and then we will ask our guest to we had put a question our followers asking, will the American president's efforts to find a solution to the crisis of Yemen? Here are some of the answers. One gentleman say yes, definitely, after delivering Maghreb to the Iranians. A lady says the Americans never had worked in favor of any Arab country. The Americans work only for their own interests and Israel's interests. We should not believe USA. Just look to Iraq. Have they solved the problems of Iraq? Another gentleman said, as they speak now about solution, and the UN has only saying concerned about the situation in Yemen. And when I hear that, I know that we are a problem. Another gentleman says some success has been achieved because who began the conflict to achieve the interests of Iran, not to achieve the interests of the Yemeni people. And now Iran is gaining all the fruits of its intervention. Another gentleman says US is not serious, but in fact they want to prolong the war to increase the chaotic situation in Yemen. Another gentleman says Salim gets billions of dollars just as Trump did. Another gentleman said we expect that Maghreb will fall down. Now we want the actions of our guests. Beginning with you, Mr. Ambassador, you heard some of these social media reactions on Facebook about U.S. Position, and what do you think? What do you think?
Well, of course, people are going to bring their own views and their own ideas to the table in these kind of social media reactions, and people, of course, are entitled to their perspectives. But I can say, based on my own experience, I know President Biden from his time in the Senate and his time as Vice President. I know Secretary Blinken. I know know that for quite a long time, even before they were in their current positions, that they felt very strongly about the need to end the conflict in Yemen. They have come into office with that idea in mind, with that commitment to the Yemeni people to try to end this conflict, restore the political transition, get back to the transition that was underway, that was nearly complete in 2017 with the end of the National Dialogue Conference. And so I think that the United States has been a good partner for Yemen over the years. We have many interests in common, and I do hope that this is an opportunity for the United States, along with our partners in the international community, especially the United Nations, to bring this conflict to an end and to help rebuild and reconstruct Yemen that has suffered so much over these past 7 years.
He is thanking you, sir. Now he asking the other gentlemen about their reactions. The gentleman from Kuwait, he says, I agree what it was said in the social media about the international position regarding what's happening in Maghreb. These are really positions are negative, in fact. The international community, what is it waiting for? They say that they are even attacking and bombarding the displaced people camps. So far, we had nothing but condemnations from the international community calling the Houthis to stop. This is a very negative position, he says. We know that the US and UN can stop the Houthis if they really want to do so, but seems they are not really serious about it. These Houthis are aggressors. They are attacking people, children, women. The presenter is interrupting him. He says your minute has over. Now the question is to Bukhaiti. What do you think of what you heard? Mr. Bukhaiti says Yemen wants permanent peace that preserves the dignity of all the countries of the region, especially Yemen, with safeguarding their independence, and you will not accept any sponsorship on our. I also agree with those who said that USA is our enemy, because USA, wherever it intervenes, creates problems in Palestine, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Syria or Yemen. Wherever USA intervenes, it creates problems. And USA have an interest in the continuation of the war. Economically, they're selling their weapons and maintaining the Israeli superiority in the region. So we must as to the gentleman, the government says that about attacking Maghreb. Said Maghreb was attacked by the aggression countries. And now the coalition forces are in Maghreb, and we promise the Yemeni people and the Arab and Muslim people that we will liberate every inch of the Yemeni territory. I will not accept any foreign sponsorship or guardianship. The last one, he's asking the gentleman in the studio. So there's a sort of lack of trust regarding U.S. role in the region. Many people in the region are disappointed with the Americans. But nevertheless, the elite still have the hope that the American administration can correct what's happening, the situation, and Yemen, whether the Americans or the Saudis or the Emiratis or the Iranian like it or not, Yemen, the decision should be in the hands of the Yemeni people. They should be the last, have the last word. So the final decision is the decision of the Yemenis themselves, who can take their right question to have a democratic country, unified, sovereign country. The presenter is saying that we come to the end. We have a question to all our guests now. We want to answer in 1 minute. The question is the following. If the American efforts to put an end to this crisis, is there any other option and what should it look like? Beginning with you, Mr. Ambassador.
Well, I think that it would be extremely unfortunate if we miss this opportunity, but I expect that the parties will, at some point, come to recognize that the continuation of this conflict is not in their interest, and that there will be a return to a negotiation. There will be a settlement. No civil war ever goes on without a conclusion. This civil war won't go on without a conclusion either. So the issue is really, have we come to a point where we can actually achieve a peaceful resolution, where we can put the suffering of the Yemeni people behind us and begin to rebuild and reconstruct Yemen? Or is this war going to continue for a further period with more suffering, more destruction, more hopelessness on the part of the Yemenis?
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Now is asking the other gentleman. Mr. Qizin said we want the end of the war and to put an end to the sufferings of our people. But we want not just putting end to the battles, no, we want to put an end to the radical reasons that led to the war. Everyone knows that the Houthis coup d'etat on 21st began is the real reason behind the war. These people, the Houthis, live only on the war and were warmongers. If the international community wants to put an end to the crisis, there must first have international strong position through the Security Council, especially the resolution 2216. The presenter is trying to interrupt him because it's short of time. The presenter is trying to stop. He's trying to stop him, but he keeps talking. Now the question is Mr. Bukheti. He says that U.S. and all the aggressive countries, UK, Saudi, the Emirates, and their mercenaries, they all speak about the sufferings of the Yemenis, which is the result of the external aggression on Yemen. But at the same time, they refuse stopping the war and lifting the blockade. The sufferings of the Yemenis from the blockade is more than the sufferings as a result of the war. Few days, US added two Yemenis on the sanction list, and I'm sure that will not affect these two people. But US is sanctioning all the Yemenis by stopping or banning the entry of fuel into the country. That's why I say I call all the Yemenis to unify their ranks, to liberate every part of the territory of Yemen. As for us, we want to build an internal political process that will get all parties of the conflict. Now the question, last question, the last answer from the Mr. Saeed. If these efforts fail, Yemen have two choices: either they put an end to the war and the reasons that led to the war, or the second option will be that the situation will aggravate until that Yemen will be dispersed and there will be a complete destruction in the region. That's why peace is to stop the war by stopping the reasons that led to the war, so they can have permanent peace in Yemen. The presenter is thanking the guests, saying that we have come to the end of this discussion. He is putting an end, reminding the viewers of the title, and so I would like to, at the end of the session, would like to thank our guest from Washington, Mr. Ambassador Jared Firestein. You are on the screen with your titles, and now he's thanking the other guests. You're still on the screen, sir. He's thanking the other guests. And finally, he's thanking the Al Jazeera correspondent, Mr. Saeed Thabit. Thanking you all. Now you're off camera, sir. Thank you, sir. Goodbye. It was a pleasure having you with us, Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thank you, sir. Have a good day.